Much could be said about Poe, the garlic farmer, though nothing said from those who knew him would be much pleasant. A feeble old man, living off of selling garlic that he farmed, hated and outcast by those around him. Visually alone, Poe was a sore to the eye. His voice sounded of gravel and mucus, and his one dead eye was more than most could stomach. But all that could be ignored if it wasn't for the stench. Being a garlic farmer came with many downfalls. Most notable of them was the putrid smell. None could stand being anywhere near Poe without feeling ill. The only reason they even let Poe anywhere near their small town of Duskmire was the need of his garlic. Though once they had what they needed, he was quickly shunned away, back to his small, broken, and rotted cabin just outside of town. Poe, too, only tolerated the villagers enough to sell his garlic, and gladly retreated to his home. He would spend his nights alone, cursing the people of Duskmire, wishing he could punish them for the way they treated him and how they spoke ill of him. Even though he harbored these emotions, never would he act on them. Deep down, Poe wanted acceptance, but he had no other option to continue his craft of farming. It was all he knew. One day, when the reckoning began, and all manner of demons and beasts rose from the earth, destroying all in their path, destroying homes, ripping up the land, tearing people limb from limb. And that was only the lucky ones. Others were turned into mindless monsters themselves. Poe could hear the screams from the town. He could do nothing to save them, so he began doing what he could to fortify his old home. Poe took what scrap boards he had and nailed them crudely to his windows. He pushed his old furniture in front of the doors. Mid-swing of a hammer, he heard a nearing rumble. The sounds of teeth and bone were drawing near. It was horrible. Scratching, biting, and growling was all he could hear. The sounds were surrounding him in his old home. Poe took a look down at his hammer and dropped it to the floor. He knew anything he would do would be in vain. His time had come. Mistreated all his life, never to be redeemed. To now die like this. Anger swelled in his chest. Poe took a deep breath and waited for the end. Then, the sounds began to fade. The demons were leaving. Poe was confused. So much so, he moved the old cupboard away from the door and stepped outside. In the distance, he saw smoke and fire of the town set ablaze. He could still hear screams of the villagers. Trees were toppled. The ground was ripped apart. Demons and monsters overrun the land. All except his land. The grass, bushes, and trees still stood, flowing gently in the wind. The demons broke around his land like water around a boulder. Poe couldn't understand it. He watched as hundreds of creatures made their way around his property, almost as if they too were disgusted by it. No, Poe thought to himself. Even creatures such as this were disgusted by him? Even mindless beasts wouldn't come near him. Poe was outraged. To be outcast by the villagers was one thing, but now even demons from hell? Poe picked up a nearby stone in anger and threw it violently at the demons. Demons that made care to stay far away from him. He cursed at them as loudly as he could till his voice gave out and he was on his knees in tears. He always felt so worthless, and now he wasn't even worth killing. Poe was broken. Just then, a swelling of true anger built inside of Poe. He rushed inside, grabbing leather straps, satchels, strings, and belts, anything he could find. He then began securing the various items to his body. Poe then opened a large barrel. Inside were hundreds of cloves of garlic. One by one, he tied them to the straps he had fashioned to himself. When he couldn't fit any more, he shoved the rest into a satchel. But Poe wasn't done there. He grabbed glass jars filled with pickled garlic and opened them before pouring the liquid all over himself. Poe stepped outside of his home, looking over the sea of demons now filled with confidence. Poe reached into his pocket and pulled out a single piece of garlic and popped it into his mouth and chewed with his mouth wide open like a wild beast. He cursed the demons once more and made his way into the crowd. The demons tried to flee, but were overcome by the terrible stench. As Poe drew closer, the demons and monsters were overcome and burst into dust. Some demons attempted to overcome this putrid smell, but as they leaped towards Poe for the kill, they too were overcome and burst into dust. Poe stood atop a small hill overlooking the town, watching as demons chased down and murdered the villagers still alive. This was it. He would turn his greatest weakness into the greatest weapon against the demons. As fast as his old bones could take him, he marched into town. More and more of the demons burst into dust and bone. As he walked through the town, what villagers were left saw what was happening. Poe couldn't believe what he was seeing. The people of Duskmire were gathering around him. They were shoulder to shoulder with him, some even grabbing onto pieces of his clothing. Those around him were thanking him for saving them. They weren't disgusted by him anymore. They looked to him with hope in their eyes. This strengthened Poe's resolve. This was it. This is what he was meant to do. Once the village was cleared of the demons, the villagers thanked Poe and apologized for everything they had said and done to him. Poe was then asked what he would do now. Poe simply walked over to a tavern that had a string of garlic hanging outside of the door. He grabbed it, pulled it down, and slung it over his shoulder. Poe smiled and said, "I have a job to do." Poe then left town in the direction of where the demons were heading. From this day forward, he was no longer Poe, the garlic farmer. He was now Poe Ratcho, the garlic god.